Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most underestimated truths in life is this: your day doesn't start when you get out of bed. It starts the moment you become conscious, that split second when your brain begins to wake up, even before your feet hit the floor. That's the beginning, and what happens in that window, most of the time we don't even notice, but in that tiny sliver of space, we're already telling ourselves a story. We're narrating silently. We're saying things like, "Oh, I'm already behind," or "I'm exhausted," or "I don't want to deal with today." And what we rarely realize is those are not just thoughts. They are instructions. Your brain listens. Here's what's wild. Neuroscience backs this up. The brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to anticipate what's coming based on what you tell it. If you say, "Today is going to be stressful," your mind starts filtering for signs of stress. It becomes your reality, not because the day is inherently stressful, but because you trained your attention to expect it. So if that's true, and it is, then we've got to ask ourselves what would happen if we gave our brain a better script. That's where intentional morning self-talk becomes powerful. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. This isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about directing your focus with purpose. It's about stepping into the role of author instead of passive reader. When you wake up and say to yourself, "I am grounded, I am capable, I am focused," you're not casting a magic spell. You're priming your nervous system for calm, clarity, and momentum. Think about it. The world is chaotic enough. The news cycle, your inbox, social media, all of it is coming for your attention the second you lift your head off the pillow. If you don't take control of your inner narrative early, everything else will. And that means you're reacting all day instead of responding with intention. That 5-minute window in the morning, that's your shot to anchor yourself. Philosophers understood this long before we had fMRI scans and performance studies. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, would write in his journal every morning, not to document events, but to prepare his mind. He'd remind himself, "You will meet people today who are deceitful, rude, arrogant, but that has nothing to do with your own principles." What was he doing? He was setting his mental posture before the world had a chance to influence it. He was taking authorship. And this isn't just about performance, it's about peace. So many of us carry this low-grade anxiety throughout the day. We're not even sure why we're uneasy, but it builds. Part of that is because we've surrendered our mornings to randomness. We scroll, we check, we consume, but rarely do we declare. We don't say, "Here's what matters to me today. Here's who I want to be. Here's how I choose to show up." Let me be very clear. I'm not suggesting you fake it. I'm suggesting you choose it. There's a difference. One is denial. The other is discipline. Saying "I am strong" when you feel weak is not delusion. It's a vote. It's a vote for the person you want to be. And enough votes cast over time that becomes identity. There's a psychological phenomenon called the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the idea that a belief or expectation, however small, alters your behavior in ways that actually make that belief come true. If you tell yourself, "I'm not a morning person," guess what? You'll resist mornings. You'll delay getting up. You'll be groggy and irritated. But if you tell yourself, "I wake up ready to lead my day," even if it's uncomfortable at first, your actions start aligning. It's subtle, but it's real. Identity follows behavior, but behavior is often sparked by belief. And here's the good news. This is a skill. It's not reserved for the ultra-disciplined or the spiritual elite. It's something you can start tomorrow, literally. And when you do it consistently, it creates a compound effect. The days where you speak strength into yourself add up. They begin to form a base of confidence, so that when life does hit you with something unexpected, and it will, you're not knocked over as easily. You've built internal weight, internal structure, and this isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming anchored. A storm can rage outside, but if the anchor is strong, the ship holds. Your words, especially those first words in the morning, are part of your anchor. And in a world where everything is designed to pull you off center, that anchor is priceless. Now, none of this works if it's theoretical. The challenge is to make it practical. That means tomorrow morning when you open your eyes, don't reach for your phone. Reach inward, find a phrase, a truth, a reminder. Maybe it's as simple as today, I move with purpose, or I am calm even when things are uncertain. Speak it out loud. If you can say it with conviction, not because it's instantly true, but because you're willing to live into it. The thoughts you think in the morning are not just thoughts, they are blueprints, and the house you build with them becomes your life. So don't just wake up with intention. Let's talk about self-talk. Not the kind that floats by without notice, but the kind you deliberately engage in, the kind that shapes you. Because whether you're aware of it or not, you're in a conversation with yourself every moment of every day. And that conversation is not neutral. It's either fueling your growth or feeding your doubt. Now, we've all heard phrases like, "You're your own worst critic." But let's pause there. If that's true, then doesn't it make sense to become your own best coach too? Imagine if you could make that inner voice work for you instead of against you. That's the power of intentional self-talk, but what they fail to see is that every time they exploit intimacy, it's not just positive, they are sabotaging themselves. It's language that builds, language that empowers, language that reminds you of who you are when the world tries to make you forget. From a psychological standpoint, the science is remarkably clear. The way you speak to yourself influences your self-esteem, your emotional regulation, your decision-making, everything. Psychologists call it self-referential processing, which is just a fancy way of saying that the brain treats internal speech like reality. Your nervous system doesn't differentiate much between what you say to yourself and what's happening around you. That means if you constantly say I'm not good enough, your brain starts treating that as a fact, not an opinion. But let's take it deeper. Why do we even have this inner dialogue in the first place? Philosophers have long argued that self-awareness is what separates us from every other species. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." He didn't say, "I exist because I breathe." He said, "I exist because I'm aware of my own thoughts." That self-awareness, that's the birthplace of self-talk. And because you're conscious of your mind, you have the ability to shape it. Now, the question becomes, are you letting your self-talk run wild or are you training it? And let's be honest, most people don't train it. We inherit scripts from our upbringing, from criticism we heard as kids, from failure, from rejection. And then we internalize those scripts like they're law. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's true. And that's where the work begins. That's where you decide to become an editor instead of a passive listener. You start examining what you're saying and asking, who gave me that line, and does it even belong in my story? Because here's what most people don't realize. Confidence isn't some magical trait reserved for the lucky few. Confidence is a pattern, and that pattern is fueled by language. Every time you tell yourself, "I can figure this out," even when you're unsure, you're reinforcing a neural connection. Every time you say, "I handle difficulty with grace," even in the middle of chaos, you're solidifying an identity. That's how inner strength is built, not in the absence of challenge, but in the dialogue you maintain while facing it. There's a psychological technique called distanced self-talk. Instead of saying, "I can do this," you use your own name. John, you can do this. What's fascinating is that when people use this technique under pressure, they perform better. Why? Because it creates perspective. It gives you a moment to step out of the noise in your head and speak to yourself with clarity and objectivity. Think about that. Simply changing the form of self-talk can change its power, but let me be clear, this isn't about empty pep talks. This is about choosing words that align with your principles and reinforce your values. Self-talk isn't about hype. It's about direction. You're either reinforcing who you want to become or you're reinforcing who you're afraid you are. And that choice happens every day. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say you've got a big decision to make. Maybe something at work or in your personal life. Your self-talk in that moment might be subtle, but it matters. You could say, I always mess these things up. Or you could say, I'm capable of making thoughtful choices. One version paralyzes you. The other propels you forward. Same brain, different script. Now, some people push back and say, well, I don't want to lie to myself. And I get that. But let's redefine what a lie is. A lie is something said with the intent to deceive. If you say, I'm strong, in the middle of weakness, not to ignore reality, but to remind yourself of your capacity, that's not deception. That's leadership. That's self-leadership. You're not ignoring the truth. You're choosing which truth to amplify. And let's be real, life will test that. There will be days when you doubt yourself. There will be moments when you fall short, when the self-talk you rehearse feels hollow, but that's exactly when it matters most. That's when your training kicks in. You don't practice self-talk for the days when everything's easy. You practice it for the days when it's not. It's like a mental muscle. You build it when you don't need it so that it's strong when you do. And maybe you're thinking that sounds good, but how do I start? Start small. Pick one or two truths you want to reinforce, ones that reflect who you're becoming, not just where you are. Say them out loud in the morning. Say them again when doubt creeps in. Write them down. Repeat them. This isn't about magic. It's about momentum. Because here's the reality. You are the one voice you hear every single day more than your boss, your spouse, your friends, your critics, you. And if that voice is constantly questioning, constantly tearing down, constantly second guessing, it doesn't matter how much encouragement you get from the outside, it won't stick. But if your voice is trained, if it's rooted, if it's constructive, then no matter what happens externally, you remain centered. And that's the power of self-talk. It's not a gimmick. It's a discipline. It's not fluffy. It's foundational. So the next time your thoughts start running on autopilot, pause, listen, then ask yourself, is this the voice of who I am or the voice of who I've been told to be? And then speak intentionally, powerfully, and in alignment with the version of you that you're building. Because in the end, the story you tell yourself is the one you live. If there's one truth I wish more people understood, it's this. Nothing changes if you don't do it consistently. That includes the way you speak to yourself. We love moments of inspiration. We love clarity, those sparks of motivation where we feel aligned and energized. But change, real lasting change, doesn't live in those flashes. It lives in repetition, in small, intentional choices, repeated over and over again, until they become part of who you are. And that's the final piece of this puzzle. You can understand how your morning mindset sets the tone. You can recognize the power of self-talk, but unless you're consistent, it won't stick, because the mind doesn't change with exposure. It changes with repetition. Identity is not built through insight alone. It's built through practice. And the practice is daily. We tend to romanticize transformation. We imagine it happens in one big leap, a new job, a break through conversation, a wake-up call. But most of the time, change doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It arrives like a tide, slow and steady until you look back and realize you're standing on new ground. And the tide that moves you forward, it's the habits you repeat, the things you say to yourself every single day, especially when no one's watching. The Stoics had a phrase, "We become what we repeatedly do." That wasn't just philosophy, that was strategy. They understood that if you wanted to live with integrity, with focus, with courage, you had to train those qualities. And training by definition is repetitive. It's not sexy, it's not dramatic, it's showing up again and again and again, especially when you don't feel like it. And that's where most people fall off. Not because they don't care, not because they don't believe in the power of self-talk or morning routines or mindset. They fall off because they're waiting to feel motivated every time. But let me level with you. You will not always feel like doing the things that are good for you. Discipline isn't about feeling inspired. It's about choosing what matters even when it's uncomfortable. Especially that. That's why consistency is so critical. It trains your brain that this is who you are now. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but as a way of life. And here's what's fascinating from a psychological perspective. When you repeat a behavior often enough, especially one that reinforces identity, your brain starts to rewire. Neuroplasticity is real. The more you tell yourself, "I am focused," the easier it becomes to act with focus. The more you affirm, "I can handle pressure," the more resilient your nervous system becomes under stress. It's not instant, but it's cumulative. And that's why your words matter most when you feel like they're not working. Let me say that again. The days when your self-talk feels mechanical, when it feels like a script, you're reciting out of obligation, that's when it's doing the heavy lifting, because those are the days you're breaking old patterns. Those are the days your brain is trying to convince you to quit, and you say, "No, this is who I am now." And that declaration, however quiet, is powerful. There's a reason professional athletes rehearse their mindset as obsessively as their mechanics, because performance doesn't start with talent. It starts with mental posture, and mental posture is trained, not once, not when it's convenient, every day. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. That means if you want a better life, you need better habits. And one of the most foundational habits, how you talk to yourself every morning without fail. You know, we often underestimate how much momentum consistency builds. We look for breakthroughs, but what we actually need is a rhythm, a groove, something dependable. If you can speak strength into yourself once, great. If you can do it every day for 6 months, that's a new identity. That's someone trying to believe. That's someone who knows, and here's the beauty of it. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. You're going to miss days. You're going to get it wrong. You'll forget. You'll mess up. That's not failure. That's part of the process. The goal isn't to be flawless. The goal is to return, to reset, to remind yourself that this is the kind of person you're becoming. Because every time you return, you reinforce it. One of the greatest psychological truths is that you trust what you see yourself do consistently. You want to build self-respect. Keep a promise to yourself for 30 days, not a big one, a small one, something doable. And do it no matter what. You'll be amazed at how your self-perception starts to shift. Not because someone complimented you, not because circumstances improved, but because you watched yourself show up with integrity. That's where real confidence comes from, and let's take it full circle. Think about the compounding effect of telling yourself 12 powerful things every morning. Not just once, but as a daily ritual. Over time, that language starts to live in your bones. It becomes the filter through which you experience stress, adversity, success, failure, and joy. You're not just reacting anymore, you're responding, you're leading from the inside out, so don't chase motivation. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most underestimated truths